Welcome to Beyond Coaching, a podcast from the Impactful Coaching Project. Join Rob Ramseyer as he interviews coaching and sport leaders about holistic coaching and the lessons they have learned over time.
I have with me today Dr. Lisa Riegel, founder and CEO of Educational Partnerships Institute and the creator of the Neurowell framework. Lisa, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Well, give us a brief kind of background of what you do, but also what led you to doing that work.
Sure. So I started as a teacher. So I was a teacher for 9 years, and then I moved into administration for a couple years. And then I had the opportunity to go to Ohio State and do my doctoral work. So I went there and studied leadership. And I was kind of interested more in the human system as opposed to the policies. So that started my exploration into Neurowell. And I was, mostly looking at social science research and motivation and engagement and things like that. And then I started consulting. So I work in organizations. I do strategic planning. I also do leadership coaching and then do keynotes. And then I usually take about 5 or 6 clients a year that really want to transition their culture and really do some deep transformative work. And then I work with them to help with, introducing the staff to what they want and then working with the leaders to help them set up conditions. So I actually, yesterday, just had my leadership book drop. So it's called Aspirations to Operations. And it provides what I call the 8C commitment framework that gives leaders kind of a guide of how to shape change. There's some C's that are related to planning and then engagement and then sustainability. So it's all based on tried and true things I've done with leadership teams that have worked. And there's lots of opportunities for leaders to become a little bit more self-aware and then also to engage their staff.
Very cool. Congrats on the book. That's quite an endeavor.
Thank you. It was very exciting.
Yeah, I bet. Was it were you building off your dissertation research or was it something totally different?
Not really. I mean, yes and no. I mean, my dissertation was on principal leadership. And so that kind of started the journey. But the brain science piece happened about 5 years ago where I really started thinking all this social science research is really the underpinning of it is brain science. And that real change starts in the brain. So I wanted to understand more about that. And I love at-risk students and difficult people. So a lot of organizations call me in to help them troubleshoot that. And so, I really got into the idea that all of our behavior, whether it's work-based behavior or academic behavior, social behavior, is the intersection of our biology and our context. So if we understand the biology of how we create perceptions and what our reality looks like and how we deal with stress management and what happens in our body and our executive functions, then we can reframe problems and we can start to understand them differently. And then once we understand the problem, we can align a solution that will work. And then the context side of the equation, leaders have a lot of power to develop the context that they want. So I kind of work on both those.
Okay. Dive into that one. That's an interesting statement of leaders can develop the context that they want. Just, dive deeper, make it practical for the coaches listening.
Yeah. So I think, what I propose is that you want a culture that's safe, supportive, and proactive. And so the safety area is really around, not just physical safety, but also emotional safety and intellectual safety. One of the things I write about in the new book is that with AI coming in, people are nervous and rightfully so. Nobody really knows what's happening. So there's a lot of intellectual safety issues that are coming up that are causing people to either quiet quit or disengage because there's fear. And so, looking at the emotional safety, looking at the intellectual safety, and then the supportive is really about how do you share power? How do you set people up so that they have some agency and that they have some autonomy, but you also have accountability built into that? And then, from a proactive standpoint, we oftentimes know what's going to happen. So why are we mad when it happens? And so if you have a proactive leadership focus, then you're like, okay, I can estimate what the barriers are going to be. And I can also then plan ahead so that those barriers go from being a speed hump to just a pebble.
Yeah. I'm sure I stole it from somewhere, but a saying of mine that frustrates my wife, who listens, so she'll know I'm saying this, is you can't be upset by predictable situations.
Exactly. Right.
So,
So I think
yeah.
strong leaders go in, they know their people, they understand their people, they have a clear vision for what they want their culture to be or what they want an initiative to look like, and then engage those people and don't be surprised.
Mhm. So, kinda again, for the coaches listening, I can hear my 25-year-old self, and I see, oh, we're talking about the intersection of neuroscience and leadership, and, that's sounding a little out there for me. I'm just here to coach baseball. So,
Yeah.
break that down for the coach of why it matters, and, yeah, give us a little deeper dive into neuroscience and the relation to leadership.
Sure. Well, one thing I would tell coaches is there's a $1 million, $1 billion industry of sports coaches. So obviously, those sports psychologists and therapists are working on helping athletes shape their brain so that they're ready to play. And
Uh-huh.
I think a couple things that come to mind is really the perceptions piece. So as a coach, if you understand so perceptions are formed in the unconscious part of our brain. So 80% of the neural traffic in our brain is below our nose and it's unconscious. So there is a whole lot of talking going on inside our brain that the conscious part, the part that makes us who we are, isn't privy to. And so the one area of the brain is called the thalamus, and that's the area that's responsible. It's kind of like a data manager. So the thalamus looks out into the environment, pulls in all the sensory information, and what it does is goes into our sensory memory folders and looks for associations. This is like that, right? And so if you have, for example, I hate being late. It's a thing for me. So if I am running late, I get dysregulated and anxious about it. I know where that comes from. It's a filter in my thalamus. And when I was a kid, my parents were divorced. So I sat on the front stoop waiting for my dad a lot, and he was always late. My brain associated negative emotions of like, I'm not worth it or love or, all those kinds of things with lateness. And so that filter is there. And so when I am late, my body dysregulates to begin with. So, like for me, the proactive piece, because I'm self aware and I understand that, I'm always early. I plan myself. I always tell
Mhm.
my clients when I'm going for visits, like if I'm late, I'm in a ditch because I will always be early because then I know I can show up relaxed and ready to go. Also being aware of that, understanding that if somebody else is late, it has nothing to do with me, right? And so I'm able to
Uh-huh.
traffic from the thinking part of my brain to the limbic system to tell it how to work. And so then once you have, so the perceptions basically, like if you think of reality like a banana, that reality, our data manager pulls different files that it thinks this is like that, this is similar, so how should we respond? Because this part of our brain is just trying to keep us alive, so it's always looking for danger or things that are going to make us uncomfortable.
Mhm.
So it runs through whatever filters that thalamus pulls out, and if I take a banana and jam it through like a spaghetti strainer, like a filter, it doesn't look like a banana anymore. It's still a banana, but it doesn't look that way. And so you've got, the reality versus the perception. So for coaches, understanding that all of your players have all of these filters in their mind. So you think about, how do I address them? How do I coach them? How do I talk to them? And if they're not responding, it may be because whatever you're doing is being associated with other things in their life. So, for example, if you have a screamer, coach, and they're screaming at kids or screaming at, college kids, and those kids are not
Mhm.
responding, it may be that they come from many experiences of being screamed at and it was never good. Maybe it led to negative consequences. So, screaming isn't going to get their attention, it's going to shut them down. So understanding that brain science of
Mhm.
how people are perceiving things can help a coach align the way they coach to the way that their team needs them to coach. And everybody's different because we've all had different experiences. Because what does happen is that if your data manager writes up a report and sends it to your amygdala, which is your security center, if it sends that report there and says, hey, we're in danger, then that security manager hits the panic button and sends a note up to this part of your brain that says, you're not needed, we're in danger, let us get us out of danger, and then we'll call you back. So go to Panera, have a cup of coffee. So this part of our brain isn't there, the reasoning part. So it's important for coaches to understand because sports are stressful. And, I play golf and I played competitive tennis in high school and college. And, our body from a biologic standpoint has four states of being. It has calm, and then it has alert, which alert is good. That's that juice you get before a big game where your body's focused and you know, your vision's focused and your muscles have more blood in them and you're ready to go. The problem is that if we're already there and we get more stressors, then it bumps us into the alarm phase. And the alarm phase is where you're no longer thinking, which is where you start to see people getting personal fouls for behaving in a really dumb way when they're angry. And so thinking of how do
Mhm.
we teach our kids that are playing sports, how do we teach them to have self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-control? And that is a role of a coach.
Mhm. So what are some practical strategies to teach those things?
So I think the one thing is to start by helping them understand what is the fear behind the trigger. So for example, I'm thinking of,
Mhm.
like been watching a lot of football lately through the playoffs. And so if you have somebody who, hauls off and punches somebody, what's the underlying fear? So they may be mad about the way the play went, but that's not really why they're punching them. They're punching them for another reason that's that underlying fear. Maybe it's that this was unfair. So when things they perceive as unfair, they get enraged. Or maybe it's that they were talking trash and that doesn't fly with them or whatever. So starting to help them understand their triggers. But the triggers, like, I hate the word triggers to begin with, but um, those triggers are about what's happening. The really important thing is what's underneath it. And so helping them to
Mhm.
gain that self-awareness and then helping them. One of the things I've done with students is something called name it, own it, control it. And so as we think about our stress management system, we want to be able to self-regulate. And so the first step is to say, how do you experience stress? What does your body feel like? What does your body look like when you're stressed? What is your brain telling you? And again, not what are you thinking, because you're not. It's your brain telling you things. And so helping
Mhm.
them to identify, this is how I feel when I'm starting to lose control. And then what can I do during that time? Like, everything doesn't work for everybody. So maybe it's taking deep breaths, or maybe it's, taking a walk, or maybe it's distracting ourselves or self-talk or whatever works for them, but helping them to identify what those are. And then going into, what can others do for you and what should they not do? And so it kind of creates this self-awareness and social contract that you can use. And it can be really powerful.
Mhm.
And sports, I know, like I play golf, and your swing routine is really important to get up there and do the same thing, because golf is all mental, right? So you get up there and you do the
Mhm.
same thing, you empty your head and you focus on what you're doing, and that takes some practice and some mental agility to do.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Um, so yeah, everything you're saying makes perfect sense to me and right on. How do you do it in like I'm thinking, for example, a football team of 100 kids where everybody has their individual experiences, absolutely, but you can't individualize it at that level with that many kids without a massive staff. So
Right.
how do you take on the individuality of kids in a large roster sport on the stuff we're talking about?
So I think the first thing is, like, when you're having team meetings or you're reviewing tape or you're doing, whatever you're doing where everybody's there, teach them about their brain as a whole
Mhm.
group. And so you don't have to go through and do these exercises with every individual person. I've done that name it, own it, control it in groups and teams in the workplace. And it's actually really powerful because people don't talk about how they feel. There's a shame when you're out of control, and so it opens up some conversations. And it was so funny. I was in one team and the one lady was like, I have no idea what I look like when I'm stressed. And her partner was like, I do. She's like, your eyebrows disappear into your bangs. And she was like, really? And she's like, yeah. So we started to look for those things. And then, even if you have your defensive line or your special teams, like, get together and just talk about it. Like, what stresses you out, and what do you look like when you're stressed, and how can we help? It doesn't have to
Mhm.
be a super process. And then I think, once the coaches are listening and understanding with their various sub teams, then they start to build some of those practices in the students that they work with the most.
That's good. That makes sense. I found out in a similar way what I look like when I was stressed out, and I had no idea. My jaw gets really I, like, clench my jaw, and I had no idea. It's
Yeah.
amazing how most of us don't realize how we
Yeah.
react. So
Well, and it starts with modeling too. I mean, I
yeah.
see a lot of coaches on sidelines behaving really poorly.
Yep.
And so if you think about a coach, like thinking about what makes them what makes me angry, and like in that moment where I'm ready to like throttle the referee, maybe how do I calm myself down so I can be rational in that moment? Because when you start to get highly emotional coaching, you're not successful. You need really analytical coaching
Yep.
to
Right on.
get the team where they need to go.
Yeah, I read something about, it might have been actually in his book, Phil Jackson, who was the longtime coach of the Chicago Bulls and Los Angeles Lakers. He did something where he would take his pulse during the game, and if he was above a certain beats per minute, he'd just sit down and take deep breaths until he was calmed down because he said he couldn't make
Yeah.
sound
Yep.
decisions.
And that's exactly so if you're self-aware, like with the pulse, and you're self-regulating, I know I can sit down and breathe for a minute. Now you're in self-control. And when we're in self-control, we're more successful, we're happier, we're healthier, and we're more effective.
Yeah. So something that attracted me to your work and something we've done on our impactful coaching project is we talk a lot about psychological safety. Uh,
Yep.
so what do you think that actually looks like in a coaching environment?
I think psychological safety is partially around feeling comfortable expressing how you feel or feeling comfortable asking for what you need. And so, not having surprises and having somebody come at you where you're like, I don't even understand where this is going. I think the other piece with psychological safety is conflict resolution. Conflict happens, it's going to happen. And so thinking of how do we train our teams, and how do we personally manage conflict? Because if I don't know, if a conflict feels like this is just going to sit out there and ruin me, then I'm going to start to get ratcheted up and start making really bad decisions.
Mhm. Um, yeah, it feels like it's the trick to coaching the modern athlete, in my opinion, is creating an environment where, yeah, you can disagree and you have some freedom to fail. And I think a lot of coaches hear psychological safety. We deal with this when we go out and talk of like people think it's soft, that psychological safety is just pampering kids and making it soft. And that's not what I see the research say. I see the exact opposite.
No, not at all. And, I think that when we think about like failing, the other thing is giving people a chance to brag on themselves and to have improvement. So one thing I teach business leaders is to do 100 ways in 100 days. So think about your desired state of what you want to see, and then assign people, and you give them an index card. So we're going analog, no Google Sheets or anything else, like an index card. And they write down what they did, and they write a little description, a couple sentences of what they're doing that's aligned with the goals of the organization. And then they write one thing they'll do differently next time to improve it. So you're celebrating their effort to make positive change, but you're also giving them permission to not be perfect the first time out. So even thinking after a practice, having a debrief and being like, okay, we're going to go around real quick. Everybody tell me one thing that you're really proud of that you did in practice today, and one thing you want to work on. And giving people a chance to have that sort of, bragging moment, but also the corrective growth mindset.
Yeah. So this goes along with that. It's going to take a little explaining. So something I feel pretty convicted on the last year or two, and I still trying to figure out what to do with is I've been an AD for over 10 years, and I'm still embarrassed that I drive home ticked off sometimes after we lose a game because we want to
Yeah.
win. That's a good thing. Excellence matters. But I also know intellectually, if we're talking educational based athletics, the most is learned and the most growth happens in the harder seasons. And when you don't
Yep.
get the starting spot or the team stinks or whatever it may be, what's your advice? Or that's a very poorly formed question I'm giving you right now. What's your advice or what are your thoughts for coaches on helping build an environment kids can learn and grow even when the season's going poorly in terms of wins and losses?
Yeah, I think it comes down to how they speak about the wins and losses. Like, again, finding the things that people did really well. Because when you lose, you just feel like a loser, right? You feel like
Mhm.
everything went wrong. It's all bad. And the reality is there are some things that didn't go great that caused you to lose, but there were a lot of things that did go great. And so helping to figure out
Mhm.
like how you celebrate the positives of the team. Maybe we're not performing at our best, but we are supporting each other, we are improving our stats on this, that, or the other. And that's where data comes in. That's really important. So we're not where we want to be, but we're getting there. And if you're only looking at whether there's
Mhm.
a win or loss in the final column, you're missing opportunities to engage people. So when you think about, how we change, how we improve, it takes a lot of energy, and we get tired, and then that's why, New Year's resolutions, 80% of them, people have chucked them already in January. So it's like if you can give those little dopamine hits that, I appreciated that, and this we did really well, and look how much better we did this time. They just happen to be more skilled than we are, and that's okay because we're getting better. But here's, three things that
Mhm.
I think if we focus on these three things, we're going to win. And so giving that message of hope.
Mhm.
And kids today are coming to us different. I hear that from educators all over the place. I hear it from employers that young people are different. And they are. And there's some biologic reasons for that. So when you go back to that data manager and those filters in your unconscious brain, I'm going to date myself, but when I grew up, I watched Little House on the Prairie, or I watched Saved by the Bell, or
Mhm.
all those kinds of wholesome shows that were about working together and being kind and all of those pieces. Our kids today grow up with media that's like, "Hey, Rob, you and I, we're gonna manipulate. We're gonna get together and team up and manipulate so we can vote that person off." It's all about exclusion. It's all
Yep.
about, lying behind your back, nastiness. That creates a sort of worldview. And so our kids come to us with this worldview as a filter. And so they're going to notice the negative things more than they will the positive. So, for example, if you had two identical twins and and one had a negative worldview and one had a positive, you'd say, "How was your day?" And the negative twin would say, "It was terrible. I woke up late. I was running late. I had to speed to get here. I had to park way out in the middle of nowhere. I, spilled my coffee when I got in, and then I ruined my shirt, and I was running late to a meeting, blah, 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 on and on with all the negatives." You ask the positive twin, "How was your day?" And that positive twin would say, "Well, it started out rough. I was running late so that I had to like park way far away, but I guess I'm getting my steps in. And I got in and then I tripped and spilled my coffee, ruined my shirt, but this really nice person helped me like clean myself up and pick up my stuff. And then my friend lent me a sweatshirt because I had ruined my shirt. And my coworkers were super nice about me running late." So the negative person doesn't even notice those positive interventions in the day. They focus on what went wrong. The positive person focuses on the kindness or what went right. And so it's really important that we help our
Mhm.
kids learn how to do that. And I have a 20 and a 23-year-old. And when they were little, I started asking them at dinner, "Tell me two good things that happened today." And they could not do it. They would say, "I'm nothing, nothing. I didn't get in a fight." And I'm like, "That's not good. That's the absence of bad, right?" And I had you know,
Yeah.
I was like, "Come on, guys." And I had to train them to actually look for the good, because if your thalamus knows you need to report out good things, then one of the things it's gonna be looking for as a data manager is, "Okay, where can I confirm the bias that something good is gonna happen today?" So that's another thing with coaches is infusing positivity into the way that they're coaching and the way that they're interacting with players, asking them, what's one thing that happened today that your teammate did that you really appreciated? And building that sense of community and that sense of positivity, they will start to notice the positive things that they do and how they're interconnected so that they'll start to work together as a team. Because if your team's coming in saying the world is basically trying to other me or out me, and people are cruel and people are ganging up
Mhm.
against other people, you're not going to get a cohesive team.
That was so good. I've never thought of the change in worldview that kids are coming. I think you're right on that. Other than, I should say, my 11-year-old asked for a Bayside Tigers sweatshirt for Christmas this year, and she wears her out all the time. So Saved by the Bell's making a comeback, I think. But
Yay!
um,
Yay!
I hear kind of through my lens, and I'm interpreting. You talk about that negative worldview. There's a lack of trust, and a friend of mine named Bruce Brown talks about trust in teams, and he talks about in high trust environments, you get the benefit of the doubt. Low trust environments,
Right.
they're always going to assume the worst. The kids are always going to assume the worst in what you say and see the negative. And it takes a
Right.
lot, I think, to build up that trust now, and maintain it. And then once you lose it, I mean, it doesn't make you a bad person, it doesn't make you a bad coach, but you might need to change the scenery to get to establish yourself. And you think that's a fair take on the current environment?
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's other contextual factors because remember, behavior is biology and context. So we talked a little bit about the biology, but that context impacts it. And so you think about, okay, we've got general media, but then we have social media. And here's the thing with social media that people really don't talk about. We all know it's negative algorithms and it's terrible for you and it leads to bad outcomes. But the other thing it does is that it reduces the value of kindness and altruism in real spaces. I can change my profile picture to a cancer ribbon or some cause, and I can get 4,000 likes. So I get 4,000 dopamine hits just for virtue signaling. I didn't have to lift a finger.
Yeah.
When I'm in real space, if you come down and I help you up, I get 1 dopamine hit. And so that's the other piece too. Like as I'm talking about, closing a team meeting and just creating a routine where it's like we're going to all say something we appreciate that somebody on this team did to help you either get better today or that helped you, help the team. That starts to build those dopamine hits so that when they're in real spaces, there's a benefit to it. And, when you look at organized sports, like I have a lot of friends who, kids are on travel teams from the time they're out of diapers. And when you think about the travel teams, it teaches kids a lot of positive things, right? Organized sports is great for teaching some of those life skills. However, this highly competitive, like when I was a kid, we played, if you were a certain age, you played on a team. You didn't have to try out. You didn't have all these different layers of excellence. And, now you've got kids who not only are always in competition with their teammates because they know the next season's coming and they're going to have to try out, but they also, if they're on a team, it's like they get voted off the island if they're not good enough because they don't get on that premier team and then all their friends leave behind. And it's such a time suck in sports that they don't have opportunities to get together. Or if they do, the other people are talking about their team because they're together all the time. And, I think about when I was growing up, like I had a friend who was in the band. I had one who was in the theater. I had one that, now you've got people who kind of hang together based on their team. And then on top of that, you've got the pressure of like, if I don't make this team, my parents' social life's going to go down the toilet because they travel all over the place and now they're friends with all these other people. So there's a lot of pressure around individual performance rather team building. And so again, sports are wonderful and organized sports are wonderful, but this dog eat dog premier team, it has some negative impacts that are impacting the way that kids view themselves and view the world.
Yeah. And it's, I rarely see a neutral impact either. It's either very positive or it's very, very negative.
Yeah.
And it's what got us into some of the work we're doing and you have a group of coaches who most are very well meaning, but aren't trained. It's, hey, you played
Right.
sports and we need coaches to fill all these teams. Here's your whistle, go. And that set everybody up for failure potentially. Which leads me to my last question before we
Well,
wrap
and the
up.
other,
I think go ahead, sorry. So
No, I was just going to
I
say
think
another contextual factor is the health piece. And, I'm always amazed by how many students, you turn on your TV and everybody in this country has like erectile problems and skin rashes and diabetes. And, there's just a constant barrage of disease and medication. And kids are, being diagnosed at astounding rates with mental health issues. And I'm amazed by how many kids that I work with that I meet who introduce themselves with their diagnoses. And so that's another filter in that thousands. So if you've got like the world is dangerous, people want to vote me off the island and I'm sick or diseased, all of the things in our environment that are coming are all running through those filters and creating a very different perception of reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that plays out to, of course, the coach hates me. Um,
Yes.
and that leads me to kind of the question I was going to ask of, we had talked or emailed about kind of why compliance-based leadership backfires. It seems to fall right in line with what you're saying of compliance-based leadership. What I think when I think of that is, I mean, you're gonna do this or you're gonna be punished. Um,
Mm.
is and I the worldview they bring into it, is that why it's so ineffective with youth?
Well, what I would say is that punishment never works, right?
Mhm.
You punish people and they may, like, especially on a sports team because they want to be there, they may comply, but you want them to commit.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference. And so when you think about how do you correct behaviors, I think some of it is helping them understand why are you doing this and then giving them a replacement behavior. Instead of doing this, do this and then just rewarding, rewarding, rewarding. And that's not just kids, that's us. Like if you and I decided we're going to get healthy and we're going to go on a diet together, then it takes a lot of energy to change our habits and it takes a lot of support and
Yep.
positivity. If the two of us lose 20 pounds apiece and not one single person gives us positive reinforcement or we're eating healthy and they're like, "Oh, I'm really proud of you. You're really sticking to your guns," right? If we get none of that positive reinforcement, then you and I are going to get tired one day and be like, "Burger King?" And we'll be like, "Yep." And so when we think of these kids
Yep.
who have these patterns of behavior in their minds, asking them to do something different requires a lot of energy and positivity gives them that dopamine hit and dopamine gives you a little jolt of energy. So that, building them up instead of tearing them down can be really effective.
Yeah. Well, really well said. Um, any final thoughts before I move on to we always do a rapid fire round to finish, but any final
Yeah, no,
thoughts you wanna or help? Yeah. Cool. Okay. So we always ask you a few questions. You got no longer than 30 seconds to answer any of them.
okay.
So ready?
Yep.
What is your favorite book and why?
Wuthering Heights. And because I am one of the few people who loves Heathcliff.
Cool. That's a first on the show
Is
thing.
it
Yeah.
I
Um,
literature major in my first degree?
cool. In your current work, how do you define success?
Fulfillment. I think that, success, people tie success to money and external things too much. I try to tie to success to my heart. What fills my heart, what makes me feel good, what makes me feel like I made a difference.
Gotcha. What's your favorite podcast?
Um, Actually, it's kind of scary. Smartless is super fun if you're just looking for fun. But I've
Yeah.
been listening to Your Undivided Attention, which is about AI and the impact AI is going to have. It's got Tristan Harris as the host.
Okay. Cool. Check that out. I never heard of that. And then
It's very good.
last
It's
one.
scary.
Yeah. So last one. In the last 5 years, okay? In the last 5 years, what belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life? So in the last 5
Um,
years, what belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
So every day when I wake up, not every day, because sometimes I got to get up really early, but at least once a day, I take a moment to just close my eyes and feel joy. And I think a lot of people don't know what happiness feels like, right? We define it in conceptual terms. So I'll imagine something I love. Like for me, it's the beach. I love the beach. I love everything about it. And so I'll just lay there and just pretend I'm at the beach and just feel how my body feels when it's relaxed and fulfilled. And what I found is that I can recognize my body feeling that way in other situations throughout my day. And so it's making me more self aware of like, these things make me happy and these things don't. So I'm going to do more of those.
Okay, very good. Cool. Well, thanks so much. This was great. I learned a lot from you.
Good. Well,
So,
thank you so much for having me.
yeah, and then we'll put your information in the show notes so people can get in touch. And then the book is out, you said. Where can they get it at?
Yep, they can get both books on Amazon. So the first book is Neurowell, the other is Aspirations to Operations. And
Very
that
good.
one might be really helpful for coaches because it's a leadership strategy.
Okay, very good. Very good. Well, I hope you have a great day and thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond Coaching. We hope today's discussion provided you with insights and understanding in leading. As always, thank you to the 3D Institute and Friends University for their support and passion for empowering leaders. If you have any questions for today's guest or for Rob Ramseyer, all of our contact information is in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in.